Wonderful. Thank you, friends. Thank you so much. Okay. So today this is Innovation 101. And as the name sort of suggests, it is an introductory session about public innovation. So let's see if I can, oh, I need to move the video, the thumbnails here. Let's see. Oh, go away. Okay, sorry about that. I really do know how to use computers. This is not my first time using a computer. It's not my first time doing an online session. It's not even my first time doing an online session from the UAE at 9 p.m. So, this just, it is what it is. Okay, Innovation 101, Introduction to Public Innovation. The main purpose and intention with this session is to introduce you to some concepts around innovation in the public sector, as well as some frameworks. So we're not really intending to go deep on any particular framework or tool or method, but we will cover things like concepts. We'll cover how to make a case for innovation in your organization, how we define innovation. It's really important to have a shared understanding, a shared definition and way of talking about innovation if you want to spread that in your organization. We're going to talk about making space for innovation in the public sector and how to become more innovative. That is ourselves, our team, our departments, and to recruit more innovative folks into the public service. And we'll end off with some discussion about how to spread innovation, really drawing on a lot of the experience that I've had in the various jobs that I've been in the public sector and beyond. Having said all that, I read some very compelling examples of projects and initiatives that you're all part of. And so I'm going to do my best to make time to have more of a dialogue in the plenary. We've already identified that there's over 100 people here today, so not everyone's going to be able to speak. But I have a sense that there are enough people on the call who would like to share and to spend some time reflecting on their projects that we could probably use that as a very rich learning experience. So this is my hope, anyways. But it's stretching a little bit the goal of the session. We'll probably do that around the halfway point. So all that to say, if you're responsible for an innovation mandate, a new innovation mandate, and one of the things I'm thinking about when I say that in the United States context is this most recent executive order, or maybe it's called a presidential order on customer experience. You might have now have that handed to you, and how are you going to do it? Or maybe you're starting up a public innovation program or innovation lab. Then I think that you'll get the most out of this workshop, because that's been a lot of the experience that I bring is in leading and delivering on public innovation mandates and setting up innovation labs and accelerators. But I have worked with hundreds of public servants who are trying to get something done. They're trying to get something done for their colleagues so that their colleagues can better serve the public, or they're trying to get something done so that they can better serve the public, solve problems for citizens, create value for citizens, for marginalized populations, vulnerable populations. And so I have, I've been blessed with this sort of breadth of experience, just even by proxy or in a support role. So I think I have quite a bit to draw on that you will find helpful and useful. So I might not have answers, but my aim is to sort of help you figure out ways that you can create the conditions for innovation in your particular context, and maybe equip you with a bit of a compass to help you sort of find your way to some of the answers. But I in no way come here assuming that I have the answers. Furthermore, I think there's so much experience in the room today that you'll all benefit from connecting in some way or another with one another, and being able to share your experience and things that you've learned along the way. So I had a chance to read the registrations for today, and I see a lot of really sort of familiar things that I've seen in the past. And so I see that there's someone out there who's trying to figure out how to define the learning needs of their colleagues for on-demand training, which I'm sure our friends at Innovate US have some experience with this. There are so many people who want to foster a culture of innovation and who want to enact change in antiquated systems and overcome resistance. This is a bit of a theme across the board, is how do we overcome resistance to change, or how to overcome resistance to, oftentimes it's like a new technology tool or a solution. People who are looking to inspire and generate new, fresh ideas to solve problems and create value. We have folks who are looking for innovative ways of doing outreach and collaborating across sectors, which is something that is very near and dear to my heart. All of these things are near and dear to my heart, but this is one thing that is near and dear to my heart, as I've had some experience working with vulnerable populations in the community sector, as well as working, with collective impact frameworks across sectors to try and solve some of these really intractable problems. We have someone who wants to learn new ways of sharing what they learn from projects, which really makes me think about working in the open and these ways of breaking down silos and helping really enable a learning organization, as Peter Senge would call it. So how do we do that? How do we share our lessons widely with people across our organizations? We have a few folks who are working on dashboards and looking for ways to make those more efficient and more usable, which I love because I've had some experience with that, both in the social sector as well as the public sector. And we had someone who was using Salesforce as part of this as well, which is a product that I've used in every job that I've been in. So would love to have an opportunity to connect on that. Lots of process improvement, getting into a paperless process, and process automation projects. These were all mentioned. There's nothing I love more than automating a mundane process. Automating a spreadsheet, or going paperless, especially if it's going to make things more effortless for users. I had the experience recently with one of these government entities here in the UAE, and they went so paperless that they were gasping when I pulled out Post-it notes. And when I asked somebody for a piece of paper at the front desk, they literally shamed me for it. So I think that sometimes we can go a little bit too far. And I'm pretty sure that their screens were using up so much energy and probably fossil fuels, because I could feel the heat coming off of this presentation screen that we were using. But we have several projects here that we're looking at developing solutions for people and businesses. This is making me think of service design, which really we need to be more human-centered when we engage in these kinds of endeavors. And this is what I'm doing actually in the United Arab Emirates right now. I am setting up a service innovation lab for one of the Emirates here where I am. And there are a few folks here looking to manage projects in a more innovative and agile way, which is also another interesting thing, because I think in some cases, traditional project management can actually get in our way a little bit when we're trying to innovate. And You know, I had a bit of experience earlier in my career with some of the more traditional approaches to project management, and it's not always, you know, depending on when you learned it, it's not always the most adaptive and agile approach. And there's a lot of things emerging around agile project management or agile product management, and the role of project management and innovation. I actually wrote a blog about this, and I think I could share if somebody reminds me from Innovate US. There's a really good report on innovation and project management that I can share. You'll love it. This is, if this was one of your things, you'll love this report. So let's do a little warm up here in the chat. We'll see if this can work for me. It's not going to work for me. My cursor completely disappears when I share my screen, friends. So I'm not going to be able to see the chat, but so I'll rely on our support peeps from Innovate US. Okay, in the chat, is this your first workshop? Press 1 for yes and press 2 for no. We'll see how this works. I can see the numbers going up, so it's people are using it. That's good. Innovate US friends, were you able to?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now as folks are coming in. It looks like if I'm eyeballing, I would say about 80% of people are new.
Nice. Yeah. Excellent. That's very cool. That's very cool. Yeah, just eyeball it, Kate. I don't think we need anything too rigorous. So one more. I'd love, because I'm really interested in this, because this next question, because it gives us a bit of a sense of the maturity of your context. So this question is, does your organization have an innovation program or an innovation lab? And this time press 3 if yes, and 4 if no.
Nick, I would say that it's looking like, I would say close to 90 to 95% of people are saying no. Then we had Simone Gore say sometimes, but mostly on this one.
Wow. Okay. Wow. This is great. Okay, this is really good for me to know. And I recently, because of some feedback that I got from Innovate US folks, I wrote a blog post called "No Lab, No Worries." So I'll make sure to share that afterwards. But I'll probably cover most of these things here today. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about that. I have so many thoughts about this one because I've been thinking about it. I've been reflecting, you know, preparing for this presentation and setting up this lab here. I've been really reflecting on when I first started in government. So we'll come around to this. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for using the chat. I think that worked pretty well. So let's keep it up. Regardless of you having an innovation program or lab or support at all in your organization, judging by what I read from the registrations, you know, you're all here because you see there's a need for our organizations to work differently, right? Like you see there's a need for innovation because you see, you know, there's a need that we need to work different. We need to get different outcomes that we're getting right now. And part of the challenge with this is that we might not know exactly what that looks like, right? The one thing that we're certain of as folks who are calling for innovation in government or as advocates for end users, advocates for citizens, is that that we know something needs to change. We might not know exactly what that is, and that's okay. But there's a lot of anxiety that can come with that, and not everyone understands or is going to get it. And I think that this is okay. You know, I think that this is part of innovation, because if people understood what we were trying to accomplish, it wouldn't be needed, right? It wouldn't be innovative because it would be already adopted. It would already be the way we do things. And I just read this thing Richard Florida posted on Twitter, and he was like, you know, innovators, inventors, they've always been the minority in a system, in a society, right? It's just like by definition. The challenge, I think, for our organizations is we need to make space for people who are thinking differently about problems and are thinking differently about our missions and our mandates and things like this. Is that, yeah, we need to make space for them. We need to make it relatively easy for new ideas and new ways of thinking to exist. And sometimes that's not the case. And this is why it can be very lonely for us. But we got to make peace with that. And I think there are some ways that we can support each other and do this work. So, you know, I've been reflecting a lot on that lately. But the point is, like, there's something about the system that we're part of, and there's something about the way that we're doing things today that just, it feels like it's not thriving in the 21st century. Like, it's just this new world that we're in some way, shape, or form, our organizations just aren't quite equipped to do it, to deal with it. And I think that's largely true. And so it's important that we don't sort of give up, you know. It's also important that we have humility about it as well, because we don't know what the right answer necessarily, but we do know that we need to do something to change. We need to be better.
Like, I just want to chime in.
So all of you,
I just want to chime in and give
yeah,
voice
go ahead.
to some stuff in the chat. Someone just messaged,
Sure.
and also just chiming in, how do you get folks to think out of the box and to try to encourage others to do the same? So let's keep moving. I just wanted to give voice to that.
Oh, please, yeah, and Kate, anytime, please jump in with those kinds of things. Yeah, so we'll talk about that today. I think coming into this session, I was feeling like, you know, sometimes even when I was in the innovation lab, it's like sometimes you're in this sort of advisory role, other time, or you're a facilitator, other times you're actually running support groups. And I think that's totally fine and totally okay if that's what the group needs. It's definitely something that I am offering today. But yeah, we're going to talk about that, because I think it's an important question. Like, how do you get people to think outside of the box, especially when you don't have a program or an explicit mandate or a lab, you know, the safe spaces in which you can try new things and experiment with new ways of thinking. But, you know, regardless, and I think many of you can attest to this, especially if you've been in government for a long time, there's a lot of rhetoric that you might think, you know, government doesn't innovate at all. But it does, it happens. It's just, it tends to happen, some might say, against all odds. You know, it happens in these moments of innovation, and what we want to do, and what I feel like my professional mission is to help us move from moments of innovation to a culture of innovation. And this is, you know, a culture where people who think differently are not ostracized or not made to feel bad, that there's an openness to new ideas, and new ideas can be tested and put into practice with relative ease. You know, some things shouldn't be easy, obviously, but yeah. So moving from moments of innovation to a culture of innovation. So I've already started to talk a little bit about me and where I'm coming from. You know, I share my story, not because, you know, you can get most of this information on my LinkedIn page, but because in reading your registrations, there was a lot of things that that resonated with me, that I think, you know, you know, we can connect on. So I share my story because I'm looking for opportunities for you to sort of connect and you know, we can find some affinity between our stories. So I have been working in public and social innovation since 2008. And in grad school, I studied social movements, sociology of work, and organizational theory. And I did this purely out of interest. You know, I never imagined that I would be applying anything I learned in university outside of university. Like I assumed I'd go to university until I got a job at the university, basically, is what I was thinking. But shortly after grad school, I decided to apply for this position as an executive director in a provincial government-funded nonprofit organization. And it took me some time, but about 6 months in, I started to realize I actually have some things that I can apply here. Like we were an AIDS service organization. We were a harm reduction organization. We, had a needle exchange program. We had an education program, and all of these things. And so when it came to evaluating our work, when it came to designing our services, reporting on our results, I actually had some of those methodologies and approaches that we could use. And so, to my surprise, there was like uh, a real world application. And so, when I was with this organization, I introduced human-centered design and social innovation to the program and service side of things, as well as data innovation, because at the time we had to report to government in order to secure funding. So every 6 months, we would spend 2 weeks, the entire organization, combing through paper, right, to collect all of those data that we needed to report to our funder that we were doing the work that we said we would be doing. And some of the things I remember when I first started, the previous director and some of the staff would say things like, it's impossible to know these things, right? And so they would just kind of put in numbers or whatever. And so I was like, there has to be a better way, right, to do this. And so what we set out to do was to start to streamline our data collection, analysis, and reporting approach. And that's where I first came across Salesforce and started to use Salesforce to actually achieve this. And so what we did was we designed our data collection so that it was happening at the point of service. And because it was on this program, it was being pulled into the system, and we had to automate it to produce dashboards and things like that. So we went from a 2-week process every 6 months to report to our funders to almost the click of a button. They didn't have the system to make it the click of the button, but we were able to copy and paste into their system very quickly because we had designed ours mirroring theirs. And this is how it got into open government, though, because when we started doing this, we got to the edge of measuring our actual outcomes, and we wanted to start getting data about the population. And when we asked the government, who, might I remind you, continuously asked us for data, they said no, they couldn't give us that data. And that's when I came across Beth Noveck's TED Talk on open government and how I got involved in this movement to make government more transparent, more participatory, and more collaborative. And I think we can share the link to her TED Talk. It's absolutely inspiring and phenomenal. And it is the reason that I got my next job, which was in the Social Policy Research Network. And there we created the GovMaker Conference. I co-chaired the Canadian Open Data Summit. We established the province's first public and social innovation lab called New Lab. And we did that with the help of GovLab, Nesta UK, and Mars Solutions Lab in Toronto. And for better or worse, this set me up to go inside government, inside the provincial government. And my whole professional life up to that point was dedicated to helping civil and public servants, uncover new ways of working and collaborate across sectors, as well as in their own government. Know how hard it can be to collaborate just across in one's own department, never mind a state or federal level. So I knew the challenges intimately, and I was more than reluctant to go inside, but the opportunity, I think, to go inside and influence change was just too good. Or I'm a masochist, but I did make the decision to go in. And in 2017, I became the first executive director of Open Government and Innovation. And it sounded great on paper. And when I went in, I would often joke that I was the leader of the cubicle of innovation, because I thought I was going in to lead the office of innovation in central government, but I had no budget, I had no team, and I had a mandate to change the culture of government. So one person, no resources, no team. My cousin called me the government's pet Sisyphus, and that was, that was a tough time, but it forced me to think about what is the smallest, cheapest, fastest thing I can do to to get things moving, to get the ball rolling, to start to build momentum. You know, this was, if I don't have the resources, how do I get them? And sometimes it's not getting them first by asking up the chain of command, but by mobilizing people to try and get things done, to demonstrate how things can be different. And so what I did was I started the Public Innovation 101 workshop, which is a lot of what we're doing here today is coming from that. And I did that to test the waters, to see who might be interested in it, who would be the first people to sign up. Would there be demand for some innovative ways of working? And it worked. I set up this session and it was 15 people I asked for because I just wanted to test it. And people started reaching out to me, probably because I set the level or the limit at 15. So people were like, oh, I'm not allowed there. I want to be there even more then. And so people started reaching out, and we had over 30 people attend this one session. Many of them were executives, luckily enough. And that session led us to some opportunities to lead innovation projects, first with borrowed staff and borrowed boardrooms, where we would set up the boardroom for months at a time in a way that was conducive to a collaborative space. And we used it to actually co-create and frame problems with citizens. That was enough for us to actually get a budget. So from that point on, I got a budget to grow the innovation talent pool. We got an innovation lab. We ran the Public Innovation Challenge for 4 or maybe 5 years, which helped us continue to grow our network. Nina is waiting in the room. That led us to establish an innovation team, which later became Innovation and Design Services. And then the pandemic happened. We ran a study on the novel responses to the pandemic, which is being used still in the government, just as a way of like pointing to these experiments. Like during the pandemic, we operated this way, and these good things happened. And so this report was a way for us to capture all of these unplanned experiments that happened during the pandemic. And we had, Innovation 201, we did a train the trainer program. We led multiple complex multi-departmental innovation projects and design sprints in government. So it was a fantastic time, but all good things must come to an end. And today I am the senior partner at GovDesign, which is what I'm doing overseas right now, a part-time lecturer at the University of New Brunswick. I teach leadership for social innovation. I teach technology and social change. I'm also an associate at Think Digital, which is it's a consultancy for the public sector around digital transformation. Yeah, like I mentioned, I'm here now setting up a service design lab. And I've been an outspoken advocate for open government, digital transformation, and public sector innovation for a long time. You can probably tell that it's important to me. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but I will say that I'm doing this because where I come from, it's kind of fashionable to complain about the government. And, I feel really fortunate to get to figure out why that is. Like, why what was the deal with the system that's creating this emergent property that in line at the coffee shops and anywhere you go, people are complaining about the government. And at the deepest level, we all know that at its worst, government can be responsible for some pretty atrocious things. In my country, it was it's the residential school program, which it's coming to a reckoning now in my country. But I think that the opposite is true. I think that if we can change the way we do some things, even starting in the smallest of ways, we can actually start to become a government that is delivering value, that is helping solve really intractable problems, and hopefully is able to heal some of the harm that has been caused in the past, like through this residential school program I mentioned. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is I think that we can do so much better. And I have seen so many people and so many examples of how this can happen, that it gets me going. So
Nick, I just want to jump in just to keep us on time with 35 minutes in. Do you want to just briefly run through what folks can expect in terms of the last 90 minutes, just so they know what to expect? Realize that we didn't cover that at the top.
You didn't? Yeah, so we're going to cover in the next 90 minutes, we're going to go through making the case for innovation. We're going to talk about how to make space for innovation. I know that a lot of you are working on projects to cover that. And we're going to try to take a bulk of the time to hear from you about the projects that you're working on and see if we can get some rich discussion going around those.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I had my timer was off. Sorry, Kate.
All good.
Yeah. I'm also, we can skip ahead on some things as well, but let's can we do this part just to give folks a break from my voice, and then see what comes out of this session?
Sure. So we're going to send folks into breakouts. And Nick, do you want to just run through, because when you're in the breakout, I don't think you'll be able to see the slide, how long we want to send them in for, and what you want them to chat about.
Yeah. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to just get to know some of the folks who are in the room today, because this is a very important part of innovation. So just when you go to your breakout room, take a minute just to jot down, by yourself in silence, your name, where you work, and why innovation in the public sector is important to you. And then we're going to get you to share. We're just going to do this for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back, and if one or two volunteers like to share what came out of that, that would be great. And as always, please share in the chat anything that you want to contribute to the conversation.
Perfect. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
And I will go ahead and open those breakout rooms. And as a reminder, for some of the breakout rooms, we'll have someone from our team in to join that conversation. But for many of them, we won't, because we'd like to keep the room small. So feel free to come off, start the conversation, and just engage. And we'll see you all in about 10 minutes. Okay.
An innovative idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zoom. We're all back.
The breakout session finished?
Yeah.
Oh, we were on a roll.
We were warming up.
Yep.
Tell us about it.
I know for me, I was talking about innovation in terms of working for a child protection agency in New Jersey, and how there was a really bad incident of abuse and neglect of 3 children of a family that had an open case. And that led into a giant lawsuit. And that lawsuit, it forced us to change our work practice and policy. We actually ended up collaborating with a lot of different outside agencies to bring in to help with the work that we had to do. They changed policy on how many cases you can have. And it was just truly innovation at its best. And then I was in the group at the very end telling everyone that this morning I had an interview to be a supervisor where I work, and that when I saw this training, I right away clicked all the boxes and said, I'm taking all this training because I want to be the best supervisor I can be. And as a new supervisor, I want to always be able to have an innovative idea.
Joyce, yes.
Yeah.
So great. Oh, thanks for being here. I love it. You might be, there's a group in the UK called, I think it's called Mind of My Own, and they worked with like with social workers in the UK. It might be interesting to you. I came across them because I was also doing a project in child protection in my province, and it was an innovation project as well. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk about it sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's also a book called The Trampoline Effect that was recently published about child protection as well, that you might find really interesting. It covers innovation, and it has some innovation case studies for social workers in it.
Sounds great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing, Joyce. And was your session in the main room?
Say that again?
No, it wasn't. Okay. No, I thought maybe you were in the main room. Okay. Anybody want to share as Joyce did?
I'll go ahead and share. My name is Amanda Gendek. I'm from the New Jersey Department of Transportation. And I just wanted to mention that in our breakout room, we had a lot of individuals that work for Health and Human Services. And another individual worked for the Department of Labor, working with unemployment individuals. So, I wanted to mirror what the previous speaker Joyce had said. Some of our members said that they have some services that are just not meeting the needs. And it's important for us to be innovative because we're supposed to be making these individuals safe, keeping them safe. We're supposed to be giving them systems that work, when they call about unemployment, we need to give them systems that they can operate efficiently, and that we, the government employees, know how to train them and tell them how to use those systems. And a couple themes that went on in our breakout room was that, the government is pretty behind on technological advances. We see what the private industry has to offer, and we ask ourselves, why don't we have that? Why can't we, use the same technology? There's a lot of red tape that we've got to go through to access that. And another theme was we're really struggling with staffing. You're doing more with less. I mean, how many of us have heard that? We're all expected to do more with less resources, less money, less people, etc. So if we improve business processes and if we're innovative that way, we can alleviate some of that pressure off of our staff that are getting, burned out. So.
Yes, this is also a pattern. Thank you, Amanda. Like, employee experience has a major impact on citizens' experience with government, right? And if we're having a hard time getting a job done, it's going to be very difficult for us to help a citizen get a job done, or anything like that. So this is absolutely important. And Christian Basin would say, if you want to have an engaged public, you have to have an engaged public service. And so this is great. This is why supervisors like Joyce and yourselves are so important. because you model the way. Yeah, and this came up in our group as well in terms of keeping up with the private sector, and how they're moving so much faster than government in many ways. And one way for sure is that they're exceeding the expectations of their customers. And a customer's expectation is defined by their last best experience. And so if the private sector is continuously raising the bar on the expectations for experience, and even if we just stagnate and don't move, it still gives the impression that we're performing lower and lower and lower, like we're getting worse. So it's important that we start taking things like employee experience and citizen experience very seriously, and why that recent executive order, I think, is actually a really important one for building trust in government. Okay, let's keep trucking. I'm going to go through. So this next bit on making the case for innovation, like this is at a very high level. I think you all get it, but the important piece is, the thing that I want is for you to have this in your toolbox. So I'm just going to share a series of graphs and whatnot. I'm not going to belabor them because I think the main point is that you're going to take the slide deck away, and you might be able to pull out some of these slides when they're needed later. So I hope that will also save us some time as well.
Yeah, and Nick, as you're sharing your screens, I'm just getting a couple of private messages. So as a reminder, you will get the recording of the presentation. You'll also get the slides. So just to rest assured, you'll get those either tomorrow or first thing on Monday.
All right, I think this should be working.
We've got it. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, so we've already mentioned technology, and I show these slides because everybody says, "Oh, things are changing so much faster than usual," and some people might say that's debatable, but I think that we have a lot of evidence to suggest that yes, things are happening, things are changing at a faster pace, and so technology is being adopted at a much faster pace. Social changes and social attitudes are changing at a much faster pace. Big data is being collected in an exponential rate. And our ability to process that data is famously growing at an exponential rate. Computers are getting faster, right? Customer service expectations are changing. And so by generation, each generation is expecting or seeing empathy as more important in customer service than the last. And our society is becoming more complex. Wicked problems are getting more wicked. These next ones I think are from the Trust Barometer. Again, everything's linked, so you'll have access to that later. There was a study done in the US, UK, and Denmark, amongst some others, that showed that most modern public organizations' innovation capabilities are focused on internal administrative processes rather than generating service improvements or improved results for society. And this is something like these two things have to go together. But over time, what we've seen, what the research has shown, is that the capacity of the public service has actually been declining as our challenges have been increasing. And so this is why things like what Innovate US is doing are so important in helping us, as someone has already said, do more with less, right? And so yes, the capacity decline, we're not seen as being able to solve societal problems as much as before. And trust is declining. This is almost kind of a famous thing now, year over year. So how do we innovate? Wait, sorry. What is innovation? So a couple of books that you might want to take a look at. The big issue here is that innovation is a word that people use to the point where it starts to lose its meaning, and you don't necessarily know what people mean when they say innovation, right? Because sometimes in my context, it was like innovation just meant technology, or it just meant economic development, or it meant commercializing research, but it's more than that. What Christian Basin says in his very instructive book, is that innovation is an iterative learning process that happens at the system level, the organizational level, the project level, and the individual level. It's really about learning. And it's a discipline, okay? And I know that Innovate US has workshops and sessions on a lot of this stuff. I was very cautious that I didn't want to turn our session into like a problem framing workshop, but I do recommend a problem, what is it, problem framing
definition.
workshop, right?
Problem
Definition workshop, thank you. Yeah. The point here, it's not a silver bullet, it's a discipline, and it does start with a problem. The vast majority of innovation efforts fail as a result of inadequate understanding of the problem. Okay, and so a lot of folks could benefit here from starting to dig deeper into, what are you seeing that's telling you there's a problem, and how can you understand it? How can you understand the context that it's in? How can you understand better the barriers to solving the problem? In the private sector, who we've already mentioned, over-investing in the research and problem definition phase actually counterintuitively collapses the overall timeline to market. So if you spend more time conducting research on your problem and understanding it in a deep way, you will actually be able to solve it faster. And I think sometimes we don't recognize this, and we find later that rushing actually takes longer than we think. We need to make space for discussion and reflection, because we need to learn through criticism of our ideas. We have to learn through testing and feedback around the solutions we're trying to solve. We need to be able to zoom in and zoom out on the bigger picture, right? Understanding the system that a problem exists in. And this is something that really kind of changed my thinking one time, is understanding that a system is actually upholding a problem. And if you want to solve the problem, you need to start to understand what is actually holding it together. And so systems thinking becomes a very, very important skill and set of tools that you can use to help you understand your problems better and find opportunities to solve them. Human-centered. I know a lot of folks are looking at having new technologies adopted in their organizations, or they're conducting outreach or wanting to collaborate across sectors, or delivering services to individuals and businesses. Human-centered design is really where it's at. I think you can have meaningful innovation without being human-centered. And so taking this approach where we empathize and understand the people we're trying to serve, or the people who we're trying to convince to adopt the new technology, the better will be, and the better the solution will be. So the innovations that become widely adopted are those that focus not on the process, but on the end user, the person who's actually going to have a problem solved by it. I highly recommend Clayton Christensen's work on jobs to be done. I think it's a pretty helpful book, and there's guides and like workbooks that you can use around this, but jobs to be done is a really useful framing, especially when you're trying to get something adopted in government. When you're trying to get a new technology adopted in your organization, the jobs to be done framing will be really helpful for you when you're trying to get that done. And then finally, it does involve it's a methodical practice that includes different tools and frameworks, methods, and techniques that help us, learn quickly through iterative feedback loops. This is from the I always forget what OECD stands for, but it's the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation. Is another treasure trove for you, because I assure you that there are other governments grappling with the same problems that you are, and you can find really great inspirations for those. At their website, they have a case study bank, they have a toolbox bank, everything you could grab from here. But I really love this definition. So they say that innovation is the realization of new products, services, and processes, which I think we would all agree. They also say new policies and systems, which I think most people would also agree in government. But below these ones, and these are my favorite ones, it's the realization of new ways of thinking and of understanding the world. And it's the realization of new ways of acting, organizing, and relating to the world. These are big ones, I think. And I like to look at it as an iceberg. Okay, so we try to innovate here above the surface of the water, right? Because these are the things that we see, right? This is the visible stuff. New products and services that people interact with, policies and systems that people use to enact those things. But where the real stuff happens, and I think almost as like a precondition for doing creating sustainable innovations, is finding opportunities to innovate around how public servants think and understand the world, how they think and understand the work that we do, and new ways of acting, organizing, and relating to the world, right? Because the system that we have, it gets the results that it gets. And below the surface of this water, this is where we start to figure out how we get our eyes on new ways of, or how we sort of get our eyes on opportunities for innovation, because we have to be able to think about things differently. Otherwise, you reproduce the same things. In my organization before, I almost spent too much time on this, but this is for you. If you ever have the opportunity, it's really important. It's really useful to be able to capture examples of innovation that are happening in your own backyard. And so when we were delivering innovation workshops, we would always use this template and we would have a session where our colleagues would identify where innovation was happening in our organization. They would tell us who was doing it. They would break down what the problem was and what the solution was. And so we started building this, this list of case studies that we could point to when we talked about innovation. And it was no longer an abstract thing. We were able to say, when we talk about innovation, this is what we mean. Here it is right here, when the Department of Education, oh, go ahead.
I just want to jump in and ask a question here that got surfaced through a message to me in the chat on this topic of, can you share a little bit more about why this is important to surface kind of case studies of innovation that are happening around you and kind of lift those up as examples?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is part of the art of the possible, because I think it's one thing for us to talk about innovation in abstract ways. And certainly in my context back in New Brunswick, Canada, not New Jersey, people would say, yeah, but that's somewhere else. Like if Ontario was doing something and I was like, hey, look at that, look what they're doing, that's pretty cool. Like, yeah, but that's Ontario. I mean, it was so bad that, St. John could be doing something, which is a city in New Brunswick, and Moncton, which is another city, would say, yeah, but that's not St. John. And so I think sometimes it's really helpful for people not only to see what it is in a concrete way, but to see that it's happening in their own environment and actually know the people or get to know or have an opportunity to meet the people who are doing it. It's really helpful because we speak about innovation in very buzzwordy and abstract ways.
Thanks. Go ahead.
No problem. And when you can see it, you can be it, right? And I think that is helpful in that sense. So the other thing is we would use, we try to see what problem domain, what problem typology it exists in. Is it an obvious or simple problem? Is it complicated? Is it complex, or is it chaotic? Are we in a chaos moment like the pandemic was? And then what kind of innovation is required? Because you have top-down innovation, as we had already heard. It was the child protection example, was a really great example of top-down innovation. It was like, you have to do this, and it opened up the doors for what I assume in my context. Actually, the social workers were like, yes, thank you. Now we can start to solve the problem that we've known about for so long. So is it top down? Is it bottom up? Is it an adaptive thing that's kind of more grassroots? Is it future oriented? Or is it trying to just improve something that already exists? Like, is it an enhancement on something? Oops. Oh, of course. Go on with you.
It's a great animation.
Yeah, I regretted it as soon as I accidentally stepped backwards. All right. What I'm hoping is going to happen next is that we will be able to talk a little bit more about your challenges. But actually, Kate, can I just get a signal check from you in terms of is this the right thing to do right now?
Sure.
Or to
So
put you on the spot.
yeah, so no, it's okay. So we have 50 minutes to go. I think let's keep cruising if we can keep it engaging, and then maybe come back to this at the end.
Okay.
Just in terms of, or we can have folks, put things in the chat or chime in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think speaking more to
Yeah.
the work might be helpful to start.
Okay. So you want me to keep going with the presentation and then we'll come back to this? Is that what you said?
We can have the final 30 minutes be more kind of open conversation and dialogue, and maybe get into some of this then.
Okay, let me cruise. I'll cruise then.
Great, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So so Christian Basin, again, I'm gonna keep referring back to him. As you can see, there's a link to his book already. But he has done a ton of research on the subject of innovation in the public sector. He has tons of case studies and examples of it. And he was the founder of MindLab, which was, I think, one of the first innovation labs in government in Denmark. And what he has found was that innovation comes from these 5 channels, right? This is the origins of innovation. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need innovation, what you want to do is find ways of clearing or tapping into these channels. The first one is kind of the most obvious traditional one around innovation, which is research and development. And often we think about that as a lab inside of a company or a government department that does the research and testing and does the work of innovation, and hopefully things get out and become, widely adopted. In our context, in government, this should be expanded to include the universities and colleges that are outside of our government. How do we tap into the insights and research that they are getting from their work? There are tons of academics who are doing research with the populations that we are trying to serve. And so rather than do that work, ourselves, what are the opportunities for us to work with them to mobilize that knowledge that they're generating to put to use to help us gain insights and new ways of thinking and understanding the problem to innovate. New technology, it's obvious as well, but it's important to recognize it because it gives us more of an opportunity to use data that might be widely dispersed and to communicate and collaborate with people who are not necessarily in the same place. I often say, actually my clerk at one time when we were on a panel, she
Did he freeze or is it me?
Nick, I think you froze.
Okay.
Yes, he froze.
We'll just give him a minute. No, Sandra, it was not your computer. We'll just give him a minute to see if he can rejoin, and I will shoot him a quick note. Nick, are you back with us? He has dropped off.
I think I'm here now.
You're there, go ahead.
It completely crashed, but restarted itself. So
Well, we're happy to have you. Maybe.
Oh, good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't remember what I was saying.
You were talking about new technology. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. The point here is that I think technology, in this case, in terms of supporting innovation, allows us to connect with people who aren't like the cubicle next to us, right? This is one way of getting out of the building and seeing what's possible. And I think I've benefited. I mean, the whole reason I know Kate is because of Twitter, right? So like, this is an opportunity for us to meet people who we normally wouldn't be able to meet and get exposed to new and fresh ideas that we might need for innovation. Am I still here?
You're with
Is it
us.
working?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, great. Efficiency demands are obvious. We've talked about them a lot already. Employee driven. So I think one of the things is, how do we start tapping into our colleagues and our employees, especially frontline service providers, social workers, teachers, et cetera, to get ideas, because they know they have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening on the front line. So giving them an opportunity to bring their ideas forward, or at least help us understand the problem in a different way, is important. And then citizen-led. So how do we engage citizens in problem solving, and finding ways to create that space and make that space. And I think a lot of you who are doing outreach with the community already can think about some opportunities that you might have to do that. There are three main conditions. We need space, whether it's time, whatever, to explore new ways to understand problems. We need spaces to test and experiment with solutions. And we need to find ways of adopting and scaling solutions. And I think the adoption frame is really important to think about, because I know a lot of you are trying to get solutions adopted in your departments, new technologies, for example, and you're experiencing resistance. I think taking the adoption frame instead of the implementation frame can be a really helpful one, in that you start to not, the first step isn't, hey, I need you to use this thing now, or hey, you're really in the way of this thing, but to understand the job that someone's trying to get done, and what can you do to change the solution so that they will use it, to generate a pull on the solution as opposed to a push, which I think is implementation gives you that sort of push momentum. Okay, or lack of momentum. Again, in Innovation 201, we would cover these more deeply, but I'm putting them on your radar. My hope is that for most of this session, there are concepts and frameworks that are being put on your radar that you will be able to put into use later, that you'll be able to look into later and find ways of using it. But we need these frameworks and models to help us understand the world, to understand problems, to figure out best ways of idea generation and testing. Theory U is one of my favorites. It is like forming, storming, norming, and performing, but it's on steroids. It's much deeper. It's for people who are involved in transformation projects. Warning, it's a little bit granola, but I've written some less granola ways of understanding it. And I know that you are familiar with or understand that these tools out here exist, but it's knowing when to apply them and to start, building our capacity to use these tools and techniques, and hiring for them. Hiring people who have experience in agile methodologies, hiring people or bringing in outside experts and facilitators to help us develop our competencies around systems thinking and human-centered design and behavioral insights. Hello?
I think it was just one person who came in and was on mute. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of adoption, I think this is the most important innovation adoption. This is the most important framework that you can think of, because I think we can so easily get bogged down with trying to implement a solution, and we're trying to get everybody to adopt it really fast. And this approach, this is the Rogers Innovation Diffusion Curve, or Innovation Adoption Curve. And it is a research-based pattern, so understanding of how innovation is adopted throughout a system. And so you might consider yourself an innovator and you have an idea and you want to introduce it to the organization. The best way to do it is to find the early adopters in your organization. Who are the people who want to solve the problem just as badly as you do, and that they're willing to try a thing out when it is buggy, when it doesn't necessarily work properly, but they want to be they want to be part of this innovation story. So this is an archetype. If you can develop a sense of identifying who the early adopters are in relation to a problem you're trying to solve or a solution that you have, you will move a lot faster, because if you can find them, they can start using the thing and you can learn about how they use it in such a way that you can change the solution, right? You can make adjustments to improve it. You can make adjustments to make it more usable. And when it starts to work better and demonstrate some results, that's when you can get the early majority on. The early majority is not going to try your thing. They're happy doing things the way they already are. They need to see it to believe it. They need to see that this is a superior solution in order to move, to start to adopt it. The late majority is not going to adopt until they have tons of support in adopting it. And the laggards aren't going to adopt your solution until they have no other choice. Like whatever legacy solution they're using will be discontinued, and then maybe they'll use your solution. But at that point, it's no longer innovative, it's no longer new. So it's not your problem down there. So focus on the early adopters. Zaid Hassan says, the original sin of addressing complex challenges is the belief that you can change things without changing yourself. I think we can fall in love with our solutions. We need to fall in love with the problem, and figuring out through testing and empiricism, we make changes to the solution to make it more usable and more widely adopted. I think we also need to be ready to change ourselves. We need to be ready to understand that maybe we're not right, maybe we're not seeing the whole picture, or maybe somehow we are part of the problem and we need to see where we fit in relationship to the problem. I think this is a really key bit, but it all starts with you, right? Culture is the product of our collective behavior and our interactions over time that become accepted practice. You don't need an innovation lab to start finding small ways of doing things differently at the project level, or just finding small, introducing new rituals to your project teams that might help you start to relate to the world differently, see the problem differently. But we are all cultural producers. We're not just cultural consumers here. And it's everyone's job. So I know we get caught up in this sort of innovator blocker kind of dichotomy. There are people who are trying to innovate and the people who are in the way, resisting change. We have to recognize that everybody has a role to play here, and just knowing when to bring them in to the process. And psychological safety is key, and Google has some really great research on this. But if you want to innovate, you need to have a space, like I mentioned before, where people can feel like they can voice dissenting points of view. They can introduce new ways of seeing a problem. They can come up with new ideas, and they can do so without any fear of being, seen as a weirdo or being ostracized or whatever. And creativity, it's our ability to think beyond traditional ideas, rules, patterns, or relationships, and to generate or adapt meaningful alternatives. We can't have this without psychological safety. So And you don't need to have it in your whole organization. It starts with the team, right? It starts with you and the person in your office. I'll skip this. I have so many things. I want to jump to talking with people. Kate, is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. So I'll just share, as I mentioned, we didn't have an innovation lab when I started it at GNB, and we used the Rogers Innovation Diffusion Curve to really frame up our strategy for spreading innovation. And like I mentioned, we started with the smallest, cheapest, quickest things we could do. And so in that first year, the whole idea was that we wanted to just start generating a network of interest. Who is interested in innovation and who wants to try new things, and just creating that network. And so if you have a CRM that you can use, or even just building a spreadsheet, you can do that and start hosting sessions where people have show and tells, and or they seek out advice and support from their colleagues. You don't need a lab and you don't need a big budget for that. So just start by trying to identify who are the innovators in our organization, who are the early adopters in our organization. And then you get into this community of practice where people are really starting to bring forward examples of their work. They're bringing forward opportunities for collaboration. And then it was later that we were able to actually have a space, a platform where executives were identifying problems that we were then bringing into the lab and bringing in people from across sectors from outside of government to work on them. So more of the same thing that I've already said.
And Nick, we had someone in the chat, Holly, pipe in. Holly, would you be willing to unmute and just share a little bit more about what you shared in the chat?
Yeah.
I was just, let me take my video, put it
Nice to
on.
see you.
Hey.
I was just saying that sometimes it's hard to make change because not enough people listen, and they jump to conclusions. So they just cut it off before change can even be made because they're in higher power than you. So you kind of risk, pushing buttons that shouldn't be pushed. So I guess I kind of took this class in hopes that I could come up with different ideas on how to talk to people about change, because it's not always what people want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Holly. Thank you. I think these are really good points. And there's a couple of things I'm thinking, because especially with regards to executives, I think sometimes it sounds like you have an actual example that you're thinking about when you're talking.
Yeah,
I've been
maybe.
in the I've been in the situation where I'm bringing a proposal or something to an executive, and they're just not having it.
Mhm.
One of the things that I learned that's really powerful, if you can do it at the front end of the project, is to spend some time with this receptor, this person who's going to have to, at the end of the day, say, yes, we're going to resource this thing, to understand what it is that motivates them. What is it that they're trying to accomplish? What things are they worried about? So we would do human-centered design for designing services for citizens. A similar approach can be applied to the executives in our organization. How do we build empathy for them to understand what motivates them? That's one thing. And there's a book called Humble Inquiry that's really useful. And collaborating with the enemy. I'm not saying that executive was your enemy, but it's a helpful book.
Sounds interesting.
The other bit was, and this is what my clerk used to say to me in that first year. She would say, Nick, and I was lucky for this part, but I think there's a lesson here. She would say, Nick, I believe what you're saying with my heart, but I need to believe it with my head. Like she needs to see it, right? And this is the thing about that innovation adoption curve that I was talking about. There are people who will come on board and they will put in the time and the effort and the resources. They will pay the extra money for the to be the first person to own the new fancy device. But the majority of people aren't like that. And that's on the executive as well. They need to see it to believe it. And so I was able to do two things. One, we were able to, I didn't necessarily have to do the thing and show her. I was able to take her to another jurisdiction, into her capital, the federal capital, and show her what other people were doing in the government. And so she got to see it. And then she was making more of a concrete decision. Or it's just running an experiment and showing them the results. Sometimes it's not even going to be it.
Yes, that puts ideas in my head.
There's so many angles from which to take it. And it really depends on the person. We did this project with a ton of city mayors. And before we started the project, we interviewed all of them, just one-on-one. And it was like like you would do a user interview. We just asked them, it was a pretty, open-ended interview, and just asked them, like, what is the legacy that you want to have here, or what is it about this problem that you think is holding us back? Why can't solve this problem? 30 minutes can give you a lot of insight for how to tackle it, if you can get the time, or find out who influences the person is the other way of doing it. So many ways.
And Holly, thanks for coming off and sharing about what you're thinking about. Really helpful.
You're
That
welcome.
was awesome. I'm happy to chat with you anytime, Holly. If you want to talk in more detail about the challenge, because then it's
Yeah, I
a bit
actually
easier
have
to
some ideas
brainstorm.
for you guys. Also,
Great.
where you could present this and it would help somebody.
Great. Thanks, Holly.
Mhm.